Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. So this week, the week of February 20th, marks the 40-year anniversary of one of West Virginia's most notorious cases. Now, this is a cold case. This is the abduction and murder of a 13-year-old girl named Theresa Woods. Now, Theresa disappeared on February 20th, 1986, from Oak Hill, West Virginia. Her remains would be found a few months later, a few miles away from where she was last seen. The case remains cold, but it was recently reopened. Theresa Woods was just shy of her 14th birthday when she would disappear and be found brutally murdered. This was near the town of Oak Hill, West Virginia, February 20th, 1986. Theresa was born in 1972 to her parents Betty and Hank Woods. Now, her parents divorced when she was little, and a few years later, her mother remarried a man named Rick Holcomb. Theresa was described as a shy girl, but she was very close to her family. She was a straight-A student and what is known as a band geek. She played the saxophone in the band, and she also played the electric keyboard. Theresa was known to dress very nicely, and she liked sampling different styles of clothing. Now, Theresa's family, her mother, and her new stepdad moved from where they were living in Powelltown, West Virginia, to Oak Hill. Her mother and stepfather had both gotten work at an ambulance company. Now, the family that owned this ambulance company, they had a daughter named Angel. Now, she was a little bit older than Theresa, but the two girls became good friends. Theresa was enrolled in the local middle school, and her grades continued to be straight A. She had a little bit of difficulty adjusting to the new town, just being the new girl in town and being kind of shy to begin with. It was hard for her to make friends. So she had taken up with this Angel, who was already in high school. And Angel said that when Theresa wasn't hanging out with her, she would spend her weekends back at home with her father. After a while, Theresa was having trouble still, I guess, adjusting to this new town. Maybe some people were not being very kind to her, but for whatever reason it was, she had asked her mom if she could move back to Powelltown to live with her father. And her mother told her to continue the school year and that they would talk about it when that school year was over. Teresa's father said the last time that he spoke with her, she asked him if she could come back and move back in with him. He said that he felt his daughter was holding on to some type of secret or some type of problem, and that she was upset about something, but she wouldn't tell him what it was. She just wanted to know how he would feel about her coming back to live with him. Now, another thing to keep in mind in the time leading up to her disappearance, Theresa had a crush on a boy named Alan, and she had planned to go out on a date with him, even though she was only 13. She had asked her mother for permission to go to the movies with him along with his mom and dad. So it wasn't going to be like the two of them were going to go on this date alone. It was going to be his parents were going to go along as well. So her mother had said yes, she felt okay with her doing that. But her stepfather didn't seem to like that idea. Now, this is kind of a red flag for a lot of people, and I don't know how much if the stepfather was ever investigated or considered to have had any reason why Theresa was not happy in her new town, but the fact that the stepfather was reluctant to give her permission to date, it kind of almost leads people to think maybe he had a reason for that. And I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that those are some of the comments, some of the feeling around some of the people is why was he reluctant to give permission for her to go out on this date when her mother was okay with it, since she was going to be in the company of these other adults. But her stepfather thought that she was still too young to go out on a date. Now, on the day Theresa disappeared, she had gone to school that day and she was wearing a purple blouse, blue jeans, a jean jacket, and gray suede boots. She walked to school and went through her day as normal. No one at the school ever seen anything unusual going on that day. Now, normally after school, Theresa would meet up with Angel, who was already at the high school, and the two of them would walk home together. But they would not go straight home. They would go to the ambulance service where all of their parents worked. And it was in the town. And there was a couple of restaurants around nearby, Wendy's and a few things like that. So sometimes the girls would just walk and they would hang out until their parents were ready to go home. Now, on this particular day, Angel would always get out of school a little at a different time because she went to a different school. The two of them would walk back to the ambulance service, which was 1 mile from the school. However, on this day, Angel, her brother, was sick and he didn't go to school that day. So she had to go home and take his schoolwork to him. So she rode the bus home instead of going to the ambulance service. Now, Theresa was last reported to be seen standing outside of the local 7-Eleven. Now, this was a place where a lot of the kids would go to after school let out. For the ones that walked home, it was on their way, and Theresa and Angel sometimes would stop there. But since Theresa was alone that day, she was seen hanging out there. Now, by 5 p.m. that evening, she hadn't shown up at the ambulance service, and her mother started to get concerned. She started calling around, asking, has anyone seen her? Did she stay behind for some reason, or did she go home with Angel? Nobody could find her. And this was way before the days of cell phone service, so um, she waited for her husband to come back to the office. Now, it doesn't say where he was, unless he was out on an ambulance run or something like that. So that was another red flag. Where was he at during that time when, Theresa, between the time she got out of school and the time that her mother realized she's late, she hasn't shown up. So her mom waits for the stepdad to come back, and the two of them go out looking for her. They even call the dad because they think maybe she got on a bus or got someone to give her a ride and went back home to where her dad lived. He hadn't seen her, he hadn't talked to her, but as soon as he heard that they were looking for her, he got in his car and he drove directly to Oak Hill to help search for her. Now the police were informed and the police were brought in, and they initially told the family, well, she's just a runaway. She's just run away. She'll be back home before the night's out. But her family said that's not the case. They said Theresa would never go off and just not tell her family where she was. Something must have happened. So, not long after this, Theresa's remains were found in a wooded area about 8 miles away from the 7-Eleven where she was last seen. They found scraps of clothing that were consistent with the clothes that she had been wearing. Theresa was soon laid to rest. I don't know how much of an autopsy that they did. I don't know how much of her remains were intact, that they could get DNA. Of course, this was once again also in the very early 1980s. This was before DNA was really, and the case quickly grew cold. Now, her father, when she died, he laid a Cabbage Patch doll in her coffin with her. It was one that she had left at his home. This kind of gives you this reminder that this was a 13-year-old little girl. And even though she was known to dress really nice and fix up her hair and appear to be a little older, she hung around with an older girl. She had already started talking to boys, but she was only 13. And her dad still had her Cabbage Patch dolls at his home, so he put one in the coffin with her. Now, he would continue to advocate for her and to try to find justice, to find her murderer, up until the day that he died. And he was buried next to his daughter in 2014. Now, the case grew cold by November of 1986. So only months, less than a year after she had gone missing, her case had already grown cold. Now, the working theory is that Theresa had probably met up with someone she knew at the 7-Eleven. Her family says she would not have gotten in the car with a stranger, and since the only people she really knew in the town was the kids that she went to school with, was there more than one person involved in this? Did some kid that she recognized and knew say, "Come on, go with us, we'll give you a ride"? And she got into the car with someone old enough to drive, because these would have been 13 and 14-year-old children that she knew. So who was it that she knew that drove that she would recognize and she would say, "Oh, okay, y'all give me a ride"? Her family says she was shy. She would not have gotten in the car. Theresa was a small girl. She was only about 5'2" tall and weighed less than 100 pounds. So for her to put up a fight against an adult would have been difficult, or maybe even an older teenager. She had the typical ups and downs of adolescence. And being that she was just coming into her teenage years, she's moved to this new town. She's struggling to make new friends. And now, in her early years, her father owned a grocery store in Kimberly, West Virginia. And it was a very small, close-knit community where she knew everybody. But in 1985, her life changed drastically when her parents divorced. Now, see, her mother and her father had not been divorced very long when her mother remarries this new man and moves the family away from her father and the support system that she had. Now, red flag, I'm just, I'm amateur sleuthing here. And like I said, I don't know if this man was ever considered a suspect. I don't know if he's still alive today. I don't know if police ever really even questioned him, or if he had a really rock solid alibi. I don't know. But it's just red flags. On February 20th, 1986, Theresa's day began like any other. She went to school, and she was excited about the day ahead. Her mother dropped her off at school that morning. After school let out at 3 p.m., Theresa was seen standing outside the 7-Eleven. This was her last confirmed sighting. Now, her family quickly contacted the local authorities at 5 p.m. when they couldn't find Theresa anywhere in the town. They kind of knew her routine. They knew what time she got out of school. They knew how long it would take her to walk. Even if she stopped off at 7-Eleven, they checked around these local restaurants, Wendy's, and some of the little places where some of the kids would go to hang out. They talked to Angel. She said, I didn't see her after school. I rode the bus home. And of course, like I said earlier, the police automatically, labeled her as a runaway. However, this theory quickly fell apart. Theresa had taken none of her belongings with her. Her school said she had been at school all day, and when the bell rang, she left school on foot like she did every day. She walks to the 7-Eleven. If she was going to run away, she took none of her clothing, she took none of her articles. And so the days turned into weeks, and the runaway theory seemed unlikely. Theresa was looking forward to her upcoming birthday. Her parents said she had no reason to leave, and that if she had wanted to go back to her dad's, she would have asked for permission. Her father once again said the last time that he talked to her, she did seem to be a little bit upset, but he kind of set it aside as like she's not liking this new town, she's not liking this new school. Her mom had hoped that with a little bit more time. It says here Theresa did have a boyfriend named Johnny, and he worked at the IGA store that was located directly across from the 7-Eleven. So now what is this about, this Johnny? How old was this kid? Did she walk across to the IGA knowing that he was there working after school that day, and maybe she met up with someone there? What about this Johnny's father who says someone called that day? Someone called. It doesn't say when this person supposedly called. It just says he reported that he received a phone call from someone who might have been Theresa. Despite an extensive search, posters were put up. The media was informed. They ran these stories about her being missing. Her stepfather expressed frustration with the investigation, asking why the FBI had not been called in. On April 19th, so exactly about 2 months to the day, an article highlighted the struggle. After weeks, 13-year-old Theresa Woods is still missing. Now, on April the 6th, Theresa would have turned 14. Her birthday came and went without any sign of her. Her mother's heartache deepened, knowing how much her daughter had been looking forward to her birthday. And the birthday comes and goes with no word from Theresa. Theresa Ann Woods' case remains a reminder of a life cut short. On June 5th, 1986, the quiet lives of two men fishing for minnows in Laurel Creek were disrupted by a chilling discovery. John and Gerald Davis stumbled upon a human skull partially submerged in the water. They immediately contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Department. Now, the authorities came out and they began to comb that area, and they uncovered more human remains. They also found fragments of clothing, jewelry, and some strands of bright red hair. These items strongly suggested that the remains belonged to Theresa Ann Woods. An article in the newspaper the next day said, the body of a girl was found Thursday in the Laurel Creek area. It is believed that she is that Oak Hill girl who's been missing since February. A body fitting the description of Theresa Woods, age 13, was found in Laurel Creek about 8 p.m. Thursday night. While police could not identify her remains, they were adamant that this was her. A few days later, the West Virginia State Medical Examiner confirmed the grim reality. This was Theresa's remains. It was determined that she had been the victim of a homicide. The exact cause of her death remains undisclosed to this day, and authorities believe that there was a sexual attack. So they think whoever killed her had raped her prior to murdering her. The discovery of Theresa's remains raised numerous questions, particularly regarding the timeline and location of her body. Her body was found approximately 9 miles from the area where she was last seen. Someone had to have driven her. 9 miles is not a long drive from where she was located. The question on everyone's mind was, how did Theresa end up in Laurel Creek? There were only 2 roads from the 7-Eleven to Laurel Creek. There were no shortcuts and no intersecting roads. This made the absence of witnesses even more perplexing. So what they're saying here is there was only 2 ways that she could have gotten into a car with somebody. There was only 2 ways to go from this 7-Eleven to this creek, or this area where her body was discovered. And there were no back roads, there were no shortcut roads. You either had to drive along 2 main roads. But keep in mind, this was the 80s. This was before cameras were up everywhere. And people probably were just going about their day, that time of day, not really thinking anything about seeing a teenage girl in a car with somebody that time of day because school had just got out. The decomposition of Theresa's body, compounded by the passage of 4 months, complicated the investigation. Animal activity had scattered the remains around, making Theresa's final moments more difficult to put together. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Over the years, the West Virginia State Police, Oak Hill Police Department, and Fayette County Sheriff's Department have searched for leads for the girl's killer. Until his death, her father, Hank, gave interviews to media in an effort to find out who killed his daughter. Now, he died in 2014. Now, I spoke about her friend Angel, who was the daughter of these people that owned this ambulance service. And she was 17. Theresa was only 13 when they met. Their parents worked together and they lived close to each other. They became friends. She talks about meeting them and saying that Rick and Betty went to work for her mom at the ambulance service. And her mother owned a trailer on the property, and that was where they lived. That was where Theresa and her family were living at the time of her disappearance. My mom was big on company dinners and things like that during the holidays, and the Holcombs would always bring Theresa. When they moved into the trailer, it was like I had known her my whole life. We immediately became fast friends. Now, I talked about in the other article how Theresa had been asking her mom to let her return back to her former her dad's home, to go back to the school where she had been attending. And her mother told her that they would talk about that after the end of that school year and they would decide on that. But that never happened because Theresa disappeared soon after this. Theresa had told her friend Angel that she had a crush on a boy named Alan. But now in the other article, it says that she actually had a boyfriend named Johnny who worked at the grocery store there across from the 7-Eleven where she was last seen. It just says that she had told Angel that she and Alan had planned a date for the weekend of February the 20th. Now, I spoke about that earlier as well. They were going to go to a movie with his parents. And her mom was okay with this since she knew that his parents would be there. Now, she says that the night she told her mom told her, yes, you can go. There was a huge fight and argument between the mom and the stepdad. Now, once again, I go back to that red flag of the stepdad. I think whatever happened started 3 weeks before she disappeared, said her dad, Hank. Prior to Teresa's body being found, something was going on with Theresa, and she would not tell me what it was. Her dad says something was going on. He had this feeling that her behavior had changed. She was quieter, which she was already a quiet, shy girl, and that something desperate that he felt she really wanted to come back to his home. And he said this happened 3 weeks before she disappeared. She asked him if she could come and stay with him. On the last Sunday that she visited her dad, she was crying. I kept asking her what was wrong, and she told me, she said, if I tell you, I'll get in trouble back at home. So this is another red flag, and I just wonder, did this police force, did the Oak Hill police, did the West Virginia State Police, did any of them research and investigate the background of this stepdad and where when she had disappeared, her mother said she waited for him to return to the ambulance service so that they could go out searching for Theresa. So where was he at during that time? Her family also said she would not have gotten into the car with a stranger. So is it possible? Once again, I'm just asking questions. Her dad just says she didn't want to go back to her mom's house for some reason. She was very upset. When she left his home that winter Sunday, he would never see her again. I worry about what she was going through, he said in his last interviews. She went to school that day and then she disappeared. Is it possible that she did run away and got picked up by somebody? Is it possible that she asked somebody there at the 7-Eleven for a ride back to where her dad lived? Maybe there was something going on so bad at her own home that she just did not want to go back to that home. So I've researched as much as I could about Theresa, and there were quite a few articles and videos about her. There's podcasts dedicated to her, numerous, but the information is all pretty much the same. Her case was reopened. They did assign a new detective to look into her case. Now, the one thing that I will share is that someone in comments on a story about Theresa that I found, someone in the comments claimed to be her relative and said that the family had always had their suspicions and that the man that they believe was the murderer of Theresa has since passed. They said that they believed that she was seen possibly getting into a blue car not far from the 7-Eleven. Some people claim that she was seen at the 7-Eleven, They believe that she left on foot walking down toward Main Street where she would go to turn to go to this ambulance service where her family, her mother and stepfather worked. And they believe someone came along and picked her up. So they think that someone came along down that street that she would have walked down after she left 7-Eleven and picked her up. And everyone believes it was someone that she knew. And just from what I can deduce in my own mind, she didn't know that many people in that town except for her own personal family, her mother, stepfather, possibly a neighbor that she'd gotten to meet a little bit during the time that they had been living there, which had not been very long. Her father has since died, but now her father was living away in another town. He came to this town immediately. I don't know which side of the family this person claimed to be her relative, if it was her father's relative or her mother's. But they just claimed that the family had always had a suspicion of one particular person, and that, they never could prove anything. And what I asked the question was, is how deeply did the police look at the stepfather? Other people kind of hinted around that maybe it was possibly her friend's dad, who her parents worked for. That was a hint. That was a speculation. Some that knew her thought that it was possible that she might have been interested in an older boy, and I think this might have been the one that they mentioned worked near there at one of the little markets or stores around that 7-Eleven. And her remains were found in this water. She was about 9 miles away from where she had last been seen. She had to have gotten there by car. Everyone that knew her said she would not have gotten into the car with someone she didn't know. So, who did they look at? Who did the police look at? Who did they question? Like I said, the case was reopened later. The police couldn't, they said at that time, this was 1985, 1986, they couldn't determine if she had been sexually assaulted, but they believed that that was what happened. They believed that that was the motive of the person that picked her up. And so I don't know if her body has been exhumed since they did reopen the case, if they were able to get any kind of evidence off of any of her clothing. They said that her clothing was just found in bits and pieces. Theories bounced around from it being some high school boys that she might have met, to it being someone that her family knew, someone that she knew, or it could have been a rank stranger. But like everyone said, they don't believe she would have gotten into the car with someone she didn't know. But then again, maybe she didn't have any choice. Maybe she was grabbed and pulled into this car. As of right now, Theresa's case is still a cold case. If I find anything more about Theresa's case, I'll continue to look into some different links and see what I might come up with. I'll come back and do a follow-up on this. Thanks for watching.